Secretary in Hawaiian Affairs. It is Thursday, March 18th, 2:06 p.m. in conference room 325. First on the agenda, we have SB 1039 SD1, making appropriations for claims against the state, its officers, or its employees. First up to testify, we have the AG's office in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the committee. Karen Inagaki, Deputy Attorney General. This is the appropriations bill for claims against the state, which currently contains 22 claims. And the description of those claims are in our attachment A to our testimony. And we have since then 6 new claims, which are described in our attachment B to our testimony. We did want to call attention to 2 of the claims that are charter school claims. These were actually from last year, which were approved, but could not be paid because the commission had already dispersed the funds to the charter schools, and there wasn't any money left because all of the money was distributed for the benefit of the schools. And the Charter Commission has also submitted testimony, which I think they can explain a little bit better about the disbursement schedules and how the schools themselves don't really have any funds to pay for claims. So what we're asking is that these charter school claims be paid through an appropriation of general funds as opposed to from the charter schools themselves. And I know that lately that all of the bills have been made to be paid out of the department's own funds, but in the case of the charter school, they don't have any funds or extra funds to be able to pay for the claims. So we would ask that this bill be amended to add the additional claims, as well as to deal with the charter school claims and having them come out of the general funds. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lastly, we have an individual, Karen Inagaki, in support.
Sorry, that was me.
Oh, you've got 2. You're twice on the agenda for some reason. All right, I guess it's everybody. Members, any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yep, Chair.
For the Attorney General, I noticed that in the testimony you indicate that advice is given to the agencies to avoid these type of lawsuits in the future. I was wondering to what extent the different agencies and groups are advised.
We have, by statute, we're required to submit a report, a confidential report to the legislature, which we do submit every year before the start of the legislature. So in there, we describe all of the claims where we provided the advice, and in detail, we do provide the advice as well as the response of the departments.
Okay. So is it a system-wide training that's done, or is it just to the individuals involved in the particular lawsuit?
It's to the specific, it's related to the specific cases, and our advice relates to the circumstances in those cases.
Do you see, would there be a benefit if training were provided system-wide to deal with like type of incidences so that they can be avoided throughout the system?
Well, I can see how it may be helpful, but I'm not sure logistically how that might work. You know, when we give our advice, it is for similar situations. So we expect the departments to incorporate any corrections or improvements based on our advice for all situations where the similar incidents could occur again.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want me to ask this explain it, sir?
Okay.
for the Attorney General. Karen, you mentioned that there were 6 additional claims and you had that in your testimony as well. Was it necessary for us to include those 6 claims within this bill as well?
Yes.
Or can that be done next session?
No, they should be included in this bill.
Okay, so your request was to include those 6 claims as well in this bill.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question for you. So the charter schools, I understood, were originally meant to pay the money themselves from the lawsuits, but are DOE schools required to do this? I can't imagine that they're required to take money out of their budgets to pay for lawsuits against the DOE on their campus. Is that right?
Yes, the DOE has been paying out of their own budget, but the charter schools are in a little different situation because the money that they're given is very carefully determined per pupil. And so they really don't have any fat in the budget in order to pay for claims unless they're given that money specifically for that purpose.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think my point is that it seems like the charter schools are being treated differently than the DOE schools in this regard, since if a similar situation happened on the DOE campus, it's not like Castle High School would have to use its own discretionary funds to pay for the lawsuit settlement. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, our request is that all of these claims be paid from the general fund, but because the legislature has in the past, I think 3 or 4 years, required all the departments to pay out of their own budgets, you know, that has been happening. It's just that the charter school was in a sort of a unique situation because they just really had no money where they could find to pay for these claims. But we are asking that it be paid out of the general funds for every department other than the Department of Transportation, which has historically always been paying out of their own budget.
Okay, sorry to beat a dead horse here. Did you say, so if the DOE gets sued, if a child or the parent sues the DOE for something and they win or they have a settlement, right now the DOE would pay for that settlement out of the DOE's budget?
Yes.
So, okay, thank you.
Well, I mean, that's what the bills have stated. The legislature had changed the bill in order to make the claims paid out of the department's budgets.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, any further questions? Now we'll move on to SB 639, SD1, relating to courts of appeal. First up, we have the judiciary in opposition.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Elizabeth Zach. I'm staff attorney at the Supreme Court. And the judiciary submitted testimony in opposition. The concerns are that this legislation infringes on the Supreme Court's constitutional authority to make rules for the courts under Article 6, Section 7 of the Hawaii Constitution. And we believe that it would be better considered by the Committee for the Rules of Appellate Procedure. And in that committee, they have members from the private and from the private bar. We have members from the public defender's office. We have members from the prosecutor's office. We have members on there from the attorney general's office, so they could consider this issue better. And I think some of the other concerns are these rules about plain error are framed from the federal rules of procedure because they have similar rules, and the jurisdictions across the country have similar rules regarding plain error. And we believe that the judiciary, the Supreme Court, should consider these matters and not through legislative enactments. And we would appreciate it if the bill was deferred and referred to the Rules Committee so that they could consider the issues. And then once they consider them, they could put proposed amendments to the Rules of Appellate Procedure out for public comment so that people could submit their comments on it. And can answer any questions if anyone has any questions on this. And we're also concerned, I apologize, we're also concerned about access to justice issues if the use of the plain error doctrine is limited in these circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Attorney General's Office with comments. Okay, not present members, any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to our final bill, SB 159 SD1 relating to voting. First up, we've got the Office of Elections in support.
Thank you. The Office of Elections stands on its written testimony in support. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Next up, we have Department of Transportation in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair Matayoshi, Chair Nakashima, and members of the committee. We stand on our testimony in support with amendments. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Next, we have the LGBT caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Michael Galoyu on behalf of the LGBT caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. We stand in full support of this. AVR, automatic voter registration, helps the LGBTQIA plus community as well as all other minority communities as it removes barriers from people being able to register to vote. This opt-out policy gives those that choose that do not want to be registered to vote will not be forced to receive a ballot in the mail, but it will help us get more people to the polls as we saw mail-in voting explode, getting people voter turnout rates. We believe this will also help engage those that do not and remove the barriers to making sure that those that may not sure how to register or have time to register, because we have to remember that there are those out there working 3-4 jobs, well, before COVID, to keep a roof over their head and food on their table, and just didn't have the time to figure out how to go register to vote. So this would just help us get more of our communities engaged in the electoral process. We thank you for hearing this bill, and I'll be available for any questions. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center in support. Okay, not present. Next up, League of Women Voters of Hawaii in support.
Thank you, Vice Chair Matayoshi, members of the committee. I'm Janet Mason for the League of Women Voters. The League strongly supports this measure. Every citizen has the right to vote, and it is the duty of governments to promote that right. This is a basic precept of the national voting rights legislation from 1993. This is an opt-out bill. We have learned that key members of the legislature have personal reservations, very strong personal reservations about this measure. And in the interest of political feasibility, we are willing to accept an opt-in arrangement for the bill if that should result in its passage. Otherwise, we believe the bill is in jeopardy. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have ACLU of Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Vice Chair, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Hope Korpelman. I'm the Legal and Legislative Fellow at the ACLU of Hawaii. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. The ACLU of Hawaii strongly supports this bill. The United States is one of the only countries in the world that requires voters to register and also places the burden on voters to register themselves. This is a major reason why voter turnout in the US is relatively low. This bill would streamline the voter registration process and add Hawaii to a growing list of states that have already passed similar laws. Voting is the foundation of our democracy and a fundamental right that protects all of our other civil liberties and civil rights. For that reason, the legislature should seek to increase public participation in whatever ways possible. This bill would help facilitate registration for eligible voters, update the rolls, especially voters' addresses, and ultimately lead to more efficient and cost-saving elections. We strongly support this measure as we believe it would promote maximum participation in the democratic process and thus enable more free and fair elections in our state. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Next up, we have Common Cause Hawaii in support.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Sandy Ma for Common Cause Hawaii. We strongly support SB 159 SD1. AVR is a much needed modernization tool for voters. AVR will make our election system stronger. It will make our vote by mail system more secure, as when voters interact with the DMV, they will be able to update their addresses and have their ballots mailed to their current and correct addresses. So essentially, AVR will update our voter rolls and make our elections more secure. What AVR will not do is require people to register to vote. It will not require people to vote once they get a ballot in the mail, and AVR will not alter any long-standing privacy laws. We support AVR whether it is an opt-in or an opt-out measure. We are also testifying on behalf of a broad coalition of nonprofits and unions, the AVR Hawaii Coalition. AVR Hawaii Coalition also supports this measure. We understand that voter registration is the bedrock of our democracy, and automatic voter registration will give voters the opportunity to register to vote or update their address at the same time they interact with the DMV, to apply for a new driver's license or state ID, or to update their driver's license or the state ID. Thank you for allowing us to testify in support of automatic voter registration, SB 159 SD1. I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Hope Services Hawaii in support. Kristen, are you there?
I am. Hi. Thank you so much for allowing us to testify today. My name is Kristen Alice, and I represent Hope Services Hawaii. We're the largest homeless services organization on Hawaii Island, and we stand in strong support of this measure. And I just want to tell you a quick story about why we came to be so strongly in support of this. Last year, we hosted a voter registration drive at shelters across the island. And it was a big coordinated effort that required a lot of people to get on board with it. And, you know, we were pretty pumped because we got a lot of people to register to vote for the very first time. However, it took so many steps, starting with multiple phone calls to the Office of Elections, clarifying rules, developing flyers to share with our participants. Several of them believed that they didn't have the right to vote. And then coordinating with them to go around to different shelters. So we borrowed some drop boxes from the Office of Elections, went around to different shelters, coordinated with staff to make sure there was a schedule and to make sure that our program participants knew we were going to be there. And it was a success, but it got me thinking, why are there so many barriers for somebody to exercise their constitutional right to vote? And for those who are unsheltered, the barriers are even greater. They may not have ID. They may not know what you need in order to vote. They probably don't have internet access. They may not have transportation. All the things that people who are housed generally take for granted, those are just another extra barrier for somebody to re-enter the community, to take citizenship in their community. So one of the first things that our staff do when they engage with a person and we bring them into the shelter and get them ready for housing is replace their ID if they've lost it, which quite a few have. It may get lost or stolen on the streets. This would be such a boost for people who are the most impacted by homelessness to be able to share their voices in the community, to empower them. And really, when we're making policy on housing and homelessness, those are the people we should be listening to most. And that is a way to make sure that we send the message that we care about engaging everybody in our citizenry. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. And just a quick reminder, even though we only have one person left, there is a 2-minute limit on the testimony. Last up, we have Our Revolution Hawaii in support. Okay, not present. Members, we have a number of individuals, about 50 that wrote in, 2 in opposition, 1 with comments, and the rest in support. Any questions? Rep. Ward.
Is the Department of Transportation here? Still here? DOT?
Yes, we are, Representative.
In regards your sense of the need for a amendment, I have a question in the section that your amendment refers to. And it's on page 2, line 18. It says, if the applicant presents a document demonstrating a lack of United States citizenship, what would a document be that demonstrates a lack of citizenship? Or is that just worded kapakahi? In other words, a document that demonstrates you're a U.S. citizen, which is the normal, common, everyday way of doing this stuff. Or is your amendment saying, hey, when they take the driver's license application, it already says U.S. citizenship?
Vice Chair, can you unmute Preston Coe? He's my subject matter expert.
Yeah, I believe
Yes.
we did.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah, a document that would be a non-U.S. citizenship would be someone who has a document that shows legal presence. So it could be a foreign person who has a valid foreign passport and visa to come and stay in the U.S. Normally, the U.S. citizen would produce a birth certificate. That's the most common certificate or document that a U.S. citizen would present. But a non-U.S. citizen, but someone who has legal presence in the United States would have some other type of documents. Some customs type documents would also would make them a legal present person, but not a U.S. citizen.
So,
And they would be able to get a a driver's license or state ID.
is your testimony saying that for the citizenship issue, the application already covers that, therefore this is redundant as indicated in the bill? Question mark.
Well, the citizenship issue that we put in our testimony was a matter of there's so many different types of documents. We're saying that it would be cumbersome for the frontline staff to remember to check on it. There are certain situations where they can easily identify these guys because there are two types of credentials: a real ID credential and a non-real ID, limited purpose driver's license for driver's license, and a state ID counterpart. So if it's a limited purpose driver's license, then they have not presented legal presence documents. So those guys would be definitely ones that could be flagged as not being U.S. citizens. But that doesn't mean they're not. They just chose not to present documents. So the staff has no way of knowing that this person is a citizen, but I didn't want to go look for my social security card. I didn't want to go look, for my U.S. birth certificate, but I just want to drive. So you have cases like that as well.
But it could be read in the opposite, that unless you prove otherwise, you're assumed to be a U.S. citizen. That's the way it could be read in its present form, which is a bit of an odd way of looking at it. At any rate, it just seems like the language is a bit kapakahi in my interpretation. But thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, now we'll recess for decision making. Recess.
Committee on Judiciary and Hawaiian Affairs back for decision making. It's Thursday, March 18th, 2 p.m. meeting in conference room 325. Members for Senate Bill 1039, Senate Draft 1, making appropriations for claims against the state, its officers or employees. The acquiescence to the AG's amendments, we will add the additional 6 cases to the claim. We will leave the decision on how it's paid to finance. I don't think I can obligate the general funds on behalf of finance. And I will suggest that since the charter schools are administratively attached to the Board of Education, that perhaps the board can pay it. I would also like to further defect the date to July 1st, 2021. Members, any questions, comments? Representative McKelvey.
Yes, Chair. You know, historically, I've never been a fan of this bill, but even more so now than ever. Given the fact, as you heard in the testimony, the charter schools have known about this for 3 to 4 years, never came to us to the ledge for a solution. And given the fact that the DOE should probably pick up the tab and they're getting a lot of federal money to begin with. So I'm going to be voting no on this bill, and I appreciate everything you said, though, especially about the training portion. But I will be voting no. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 1039 ST1 with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Ichiyama. Aye. Rep. Kobayashi.
No.
Rep. Lopresti. Rep. Lowen.
Aye.
Rep. McKelvey is a no. Rep. Nakamura.
Aye.
Rep. Takumi is excused. Rep. Todd.
Aye.
Rep. Tokioka.
No.
Rep. Ward. Right, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Senate Bill 639 relating to courts of appeals. Chair's recommendation is that we accept both recommendations from the Attorney General, defect date the bill July 1st, 2021. Members, any questions or comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 639 ST1 with amendments noted the previously excused member. Any members voting with reservations? Any members voting no? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. SB 159, Senate Draft 1, relating to voting. Chair's recommendation is that we accept the proposed amendments from Common Cause to make this an opt-in as opposed to an opt-out. I will note that there is a question regarding whether or not provisional licenses and instruction permits would be included as part of the registration of the voter registration. And I would like to suggest that the voter registration be limited just to the driver's licenses and not the provisional permit, the instructional permit or provisional license. I will note that on page 13, lines 12 and 14, 12 to 14, page 14, line 15 to 17, and in sections 286-111 and 286-303, instead of being cited instead of sections 286-109 and 286-301, since this language deals with the application for licenses and ID cards. Further, Other technical amendments needed for clarity, consistency, and style. Also, DOT's amendments regarding their concerns for cluttering of the form. And effect dated July 1st, 2021. Members, any questions or comments? Representative Ward.
Chair, I think your amendments have improved the bill. However, until I get further clarity on the meaning of it, because this is really all about voter registration. It's not that it's incidental to be driver's license, but I think it has to be a little bit more crisp. And as indicated earlier, unless you say, you prove to me that I'm not a U.S. citizen, I mean, who in their right mind is going to say, yeah, I'm a Venezuelan or a Cuban? So I just want to seek more clarity before going full on. So with reservations for the president.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, as amended.
And Chair's recommendation is to pass SB 159 SC1 with amendments, noting that previously excused members, any members voting with reservations, any members voting no. Chair, recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, members. We are adjourned.